Hey everyone, welcome back today to Winden, and welcome to what is going to be the final time period of this series, and that is going to be the modern day. So we have finally made it to 2021, with the previous episodes being in 1986 and the very start of the series in 1953. So just to start off, just for a few seconds there at the very beginning, you saw a little traffic flow, if you want to call it that, because in reality, there wasn't much traffic flow at all. There was a whole lot of nothing, just cars kind of stuck, the trains even stuck there, and that's gotta be fixed. So, for obvious reasons, that's definitely something in the modern day that I had to do, and it was a little difficult because, as you can see, there's not a whole lot of space on both sides of the track. So to start off, I considered doing a bridge over it, as you can see right here, just continuing the bridge from the one that crosses the river and just continuing it over that road and the train track to meet up with the intersection by the highway. But I actually didn't end up using this in the end. I just left this in just so you could see, you know, the behind the scenes, right? Since I usually cut that stuff out. But you know, a lot of people like this type of stuff, right? Fixing traffic, and you know, this is a big important aspect of just actually playing the game City Skylines. So for all of you that don't play the game, you know, like this, where it's highly detailed and don't really care about actually the game mechanics as much, you know, that's a certainly important aspect, fixing traffic and all the traffic jams that happen in our cities. So, as you can see there, I ended up deleting the bridge and decided to try going underneath. And the only reason why I didn't do that at the very start was simply because I was just kind of concerned with the slope being a bit too steep. But as you can see, it's really not that bad at all, the actual slope here. And, I mean, most importantly is the fact that I really didn't have any other option. Obviously, I tried doing the bridge way, which just didn't really work out, as you see at the very start of the episode. But one thing that wasn't even worth trying was messing around with the elevation of the train tracks, since the station is right there. So I really couldn't adjust the elevation or height of the actual train tracks there beyond maybe a meter or two at most. And that's not even realistic, I would say, but in game it might go unnoticed. So I just decided to leave the tracks untouched, since that's definitely the best, more realistic aspect of this, and just try the tunnel or bridge, and ended up going with the tunnel. And I think it turned out all right. I mean, it kind of just looks like a small mini highway underpass, I guess, whatever you want to call it. So it's not, I mean, it's fairly realistic, I suppose. And like I said, I really didn't have much of an option here since the space was so limiting. And when I designed this area all the way back, in the first or second episode, or basically, at the very start of the series, I knew that would probably, be a problematic area as the city expanded, of course, and traffic grew both with cars and, of course, the trains as well. But, I did that intentionally just to have something to fix, right? I mean, regardless of how well a city is planned out, there's always going to be something that just doesn't really turn out right. With traffic, of course, you can't plan for all this type of stuff, that the cars or the population may shoot up and cars may take a certain route, or that the trains may, hold up traffic if they are crossing over the roads. So I did that intentionally. I didn't think it'd be turning out as bad, the traffic with the trains and stuff, but yeah, that was definitely something that needed to be fixed, and this definitely does the job. So hopefully you guys like that compared to the previous tracks over the road, which, yeah, that was just bad. But yeah, as you see, another thing I had to do was shrink down the size of the parking lot for the Mercedes dealership there, which is fine. It still has quite a lot of spots there for cars. And another thing I was able to do, which is also very much, much more realistic, is I was able to make the rest of the tracks here through tracks, right? I've mentioned this, when I was building the station beforehand, that only about half of the tracks were through tracks, whereas the other ones terminated at this station, which, considering this is a small town, it doesn't really make sense to have, more than, or really it doesn't, in the modern day, at least from what I've learned, it doesn't really make sense to have any tracks terminate, especially 2, 3, or station or tracks terminating in a small station like this. So that's something else that I wanted to fix, and I was able to do that by moving the dealership, or shrinking down the dealership a bit, which I had to do anyways to make room for this bridge fix. So all in all, it all worked out. I was able to fix those 2 things, which in the end is definitely much more realistic. And I did get rid of that little parking strip that sat between the rail tracks and these little apartment buildings here, since, I guess I could have had a bridge going over that area to the parking lot, but I figured I might as well just get rid of it, make some more green space there for, the people who would be living there, and it, looks nicer anyways, so that turned out well, or pretty good as well. So one thing I want to mention, since this series, has been going on pretty long, for a mini-series, since this is, still what I'm calling this, a mini-series, even though this is already episode 9, which, considering the past 2 mini-series I've done with Mont Saint Michel and Chernobyl, Pripyat, this is definitely by far the longest, as we're not even done yet. So part of the reason why I've been kind of making this series a little longer than I intended is because I had some issues accessing one of the sources that I use for building in Berlin Noir, and that is the Tagesspiegel website for Berlin back in 1928. So you can view in aerial view the entire city all the way back then in pretty good detail, and it makes the series basically what it is, because without it, it wouldn't really be possible. So for whatever reason, I, and others as well, because I even asked people on my Discord and they had the same issue, and that we couldn't access the website. I would get a security warning, and Google wouldn't let me bypass that like it normally would with other sites. So yeah, I didn't really want to work on Berlin Noir without access to that. We did find a way around it with everyone's favorite internet browser, Internet Explorer, and I of course mean that sarcastically, as no one uses that anymore, and it's garbage. So I didn't really want to do that either, but I happened to actually check a night or 2 ago, and the website appeared to be working perfectly fine. So after over a month, whatever thing was going on, they seem to have fixed it, so I don't have to delay going back to Berlin Noir anymore. So I'm thinking here, at most we'll have with Winden here another 1 or 2 episodes to wrap up the series. So that depends mostly on what you guys want to see, since 1 or 2 episodes, obviously it's not a big deal between just 1 or 2. Of course, after those 2 episodes, I'll also have just some cinematic videos, which will be fairly easy to make, so not nearly as time consuming as actually these build videos. So I'll do a couple of those, but after that we'll be getting back into Berlin Noir. So yeah, in case you're wondering why I've been kind of making this series a little longer than normal, that is the reason why. So, but we got it figured out, so it worked out in the end. But so yeah, moving on from that, what we got going on here is something that I've been wanting to do since I built the station from the very beginning and had this little train shed here. And what I'm doing is repurposing this into like an office building or hotel or something like that, probably multi-purpose, multi-function building like this. But I wanted to keep the train shed there, right? I wanted to repurpose the building rather than completely get rid of it, like with previously with some of those industrial warehouses in an episode or 2 ago. Rather than repurposing those, I just completely destroyed them and built some new residential buildings in place. And even with those, I had the idea of repurposing them, but I figured it'd just be much easier just to completely get rid of them and rebuild the area with some new houses. So with that, that's what I ended up doing. But I did want to do something involving repurposing, a more historical building such as this. And, realistically, I think these are usually repurposed into some sort of museum. At least I see that a whole lot, not just in Germany, but also in the US. They're usually repurposed into a museum, which of course that makes sense, right? You can hide some old trains in there, and it makes sense, looks good. But I wanted to do something a little different than that. So as you can see, just turned it into a, like I said, office/hotel. It could be function as several different things. And to build it, I used I forget the expansion pack. I think it's like Modern Urban Cities or City Centers, something like that. It's a content creator pack that's I think one of like the first or second ones that actually was ever created for City Skylines, and it's some really nice buildings there, kind of modeled off of the modern city centers in, like, for instance, Berlin, but also just kind of just that modern sense that really can be found in any city for that matter. But just converting it to PO, I cut out a lot of it because you saw the one side that I did. And after that, I got fairly tedious. So you saw how I did it. And then basically I just replicated that on all sides. And just making sure to keep the lower half to have the history of the train shed there. And then, of course, on top, having that modern aspect. And at the very top, there's a nice little glass roof, which looks pretty cool. But lastly, just adding a main entrance, or I guess not a main entrance, this would be a secondary entrance. With another little piece there for the window and such. But this would probably also be something for involving transportation as well, since the buses are right there. Perhaps also for traveling by train. I'm not really sure exactly. But like I said, there can be a million different things in that building. Well, not a million, since it is pretty small. But relative to the rest of the size of the city, this is definitely one of the larger buildings. So I kind of like that it sticks out in this area, since there's no like suburbs or anything right here, and it's right next to the train station. So it definitely, if you were a person walking around, you'd definitely be able to easily locate where the train station is, because you have this multi-story building popping up and be very easy to locate. But so yeah, I was pretty happy how that turned out. I had those paths going from the tracks to the building as well, which are actually functional, so people will enter through the doors through the building, even though the building itself isn't functional, since it's obviously just a bunch of PO, converted faces from the buildings. But people will still enter through the doors since I have invisible paths there, and then they'll access the train platforms through the paths and the bridges that go over the tracks. So yeah, it all looks really good, especially in the cinematics. You'll see people walking through it, and yeah, I really like how that turned out. And yeah, this is more or less what I envisioned for this particular area. And then lastly, I kind of wanted to do a little more with this area here with the bus stops, maybe making it a little more fancy, a little more modern, but I decided just to keep it simple since there wasn't a whole lot of room to do much more. So I just added some benches there and just more or less called it a day at that. But yeah, simple enough. But so moving on from that, what we got now is just a quick little detour back out into the forest. And this is referencing a early scene in the show Dark. So for those of you that have seen the show, this would be from the very first episode after Mikkel disappears and the police cars and the kids, they all meet at the bridge here. And since it is a night scene, I of course had to detail it in the dark. And I added the vanilla lights here that are those blue colored, and it is very, very blue. So I, after kind of looking around, seeing how just blue the entire area is, as you can see, it lights up the entire thing. I decided to just make only one blue light on each cop car. Even with that, it's still just, bright, very bright blue. And the bummer, or the unfortunate thing is that in the game with those type of lights, lamps, street lights or something like that, they kind of ignore, like something like this, a bridge, right? The lights shine through the bridge and hit the ground beneath the bridge, which obviously doesn't happen, but it kind of takes away from the scene. And it's one thing in this game that I don't think there's any way around that. And that's one reason why I'm not a big fan of night scenes a lot of the time. since it's hard to make a large area look good at night. So this is just a simple little thing, just not much. This train track here, as you see, is got a lot of growth on it, just completely covered in grass and some new trees that are sprouting up, since this is something built all the way back when we were in 1953, which would have been, like a line that the train company or whoever, that I don't know, they were planning on expanding, maybe adding a line between cities or something like that, but for whatever reason they decided to halt the construction and not build it, which that is actually based on a real location somewhere outside Potsdam, between Potsdam and Berlin. So yeah, that's why there is all overgrown, which is just like in the show Dark. But yeah, so just adding some trash props here, since over the years, of course, people would visit it, maybe just dump trash there. I don't know. That's just how it's like in the show. But since, yeah, this is one of the areas that would have been definitely one of the older areas of the city, since, as I said, we built this all the way back at the, very start of the series back in 1953. But so here are the bikes that I guess the kids had, which, again, from the show Dark, and just having a couple of them being laid over, so it looks like they were thrown down. And then lastly, just detailing very quickly the cave there, and by very quickly, I mean, as you see, very, very quickly, just adding some police tape there up front, just like the show. When Mikkel disappears there around the cave, they, of course, make that area a crime scene. But so moving on from that, we got going to be the last part, or the last build for today's episode, and that is this corner, or this tip of the island here. So this island I first built back in the 1980s, which realistically I mentioned that it's probably something that would have been built here prior to the 1980s, right? Since an island more or less in the middle of the city would probably have some sort of building, whether it be residential or industrial. It probably has something there pretty close to the founding of the city. But for whatever reason, I just never built anything all the way back in the 50s. So I just built some residential buildings that are from the 70s, 80s on the majority of the island. But on this tip here, I put a little simple park, very under detailed, with the idea to, once we get to modern day, get rid of the park and build some modern apartments / offices. So the one red brick building there, I think is some sort of like student dorm. I'm not really sure where it's from or anything, but it just looks like a nice modern apartment. I really like that asset. It's actually been around for some time now, but it still looks very good. And then these two little buildings here are just offices. I forget where in Europe they're from, at least according to the creator. I think they're real buildings somewhere. But yeah, I just wanted to make a nice modern area amongst all the more 1970s, 1980s buildings that fill up the island here. And another thing that I considered doing was getting rid of that little parking lot there. I wasn't really sure though what I'd replace it with, since I didn't have too many modern buildings that I planned on using for the city, and I was pretty happy how this area looked once I finished this, so I figured I ultimately decided just to leave it alone and leave the parking lot there, since I mean it still makes sense to have some parking, of course, since those are offices there, not just residential buildings, so people would probably have to commute there. And since it dead ends there, I don't have any public transport going there, at least at the moment. I mean, I'll probably add something, since aside from the train station, I only have 2 bus lines, which, I mean, it is a small city and all, but I don't want the majority of the vehicles on the road being buses, since, in this game, public transportation can kind of make your roads almost less efficient with all the buses. Of course, they're a lot larger and they don't enter intersections, and they can really jack up traffic because they can tend to line up behind each other, even though technically they're not supposed to, since I forget when it was a while ago the game was updated to supposedly stop that, but it obviously doesn't stop it, since it happens all the time to me. So, it is what it is. I guess you can't really fix it. I know there was a mod to address that, but I don't believe it's updated anymore, and I think it has some conflicts with some much more important mods. So yeah, you just kind of have to deal with it. So yeah, I might add another bus line, maybe going out to this island, since like I said, it probably makes sense to have a line going here, since they can loop around at the other end of the island here, since I have a nice little kind of cul-de-sac type thing. But so yeah, back to here, what we're doing, building. And I outlined the walkways with that network pavement thing. Nice modern tile pavement looking texture there. I really like that. And since that's a lot easier to obviously, make the different texture pop outs and go around that curve there without having to use decals, which would kind of screw up the key network, since, decals, of course, go on top of networks, and when you have like a wall or something like this, a key on the river, the decal will kind of show on the wall or whatever, which doesn't look good at all. So an easy way around that is using this network version, which I think there's only two, at least decent ones, only two network pavement things on the workshop, at least that I'm aware of. If you know of any others, I'd like to know. Please tell me, because they're very useful. Because you can also, since they're slightly elevated, as you can see, you can, like I did there with that other tile decal, you can convert it to PO, and the decal will slide underneath and not go on top of the network. So yeah, if you know of anything else like that I'm missing, definitely let me know, because I love using those. And I don't use them enough, simply because I only have two, so that I don't want it to be, so repetitive with those same textures over and over again. But so, yeah, so for the rest of the episode today, I just have some, finishing up the detailing here in this area, trying to make it look nice, adding some more of these curbs here with the grass, and not too much. I still tried to keep it simple. I did, of course, add a invisible net or invisible path around the keys, so people can walk along the river, which makes something like that look a million times better. And I was worried people wouldn't use it that much, since it's kind of on the edge, and even though those buildings are functional, when things are on the edge like that and on the water, it seems as though people walking around there's very, very few people that walk around. So there's not a whole lot of people using it, but there are still some. So it does look good when you have some people walking around, of course. But yeah, so I guess that's mostly going to do it for today's episode. And as I already mentioned, I definitely want to hear you guys, what you want to see for the remainder of the series, since we'll have 1 or 2 more build episodes left for the series before we finish off with some cinematic videos and then get back to Berlin Noir. So let me know if you want to see 1 or 2 more episodes, and if you want to see 2, then drop an idea. And if you've already, mentioned an idea to me, go ahead and mention it again in case, I forgot, or just to remind me, just to make sure I include all of your guys' ideas, which I want to in the next episode. But so anyways, if you enjoyed today's episode, I definitely appreciate a thumbs up on the video. Greatly helps out the channel and helps people find everything on the channel. And if you are new, then definitely subscribe, because after this series, we'll be getting back to my main series, which is Berlin Noir. But so I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all next week.